going. And this one actually came slightly after we meant to wind up the whole series, but you guys made it very clear that there was no winding up the series without talking about what the heck is happening with store design and how this is going to affect our retail experience. So I reached out to Kevin and Nicole, and this was the date that we could make work. And I thought you'd all be happy to make the exception based on how much we've been looking forward to this topic. So I am excited to have Kevin O'Donnell and Nicole Klimek here from the Seven Roots Group, and they're going to be talking to us from their decades of experience of store design and store operations about what to expect to be changing now in post-COVID-19 with store design, layout, and the rest. I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Thanks, Jacqueline. So, I want to preface this by saying that, we don't have a crystal ball. 6 months ago, we were all saying, life is good, we're just moving on, and then the world changed. And I think it's going to change again at some point. So, the important thing to take away from, I think one of the talking points will be, being able to build in flexibility in your store design moving forward. There's been a lot of talk about you have to have e-commerce, or you can't have a food bar, or I think all those things are still on the table, and I think we will get to some point of normalcy, in the future, but I don't know when that is. It will be really hard to say when that is. But I think what you'll find is that Nicole and I, we're going to stress flexibility and, having a plan and being able to phase it in if you need to phase it in. So, why don't we start with the slideshow, Jacqueline?
Okay.
And you can probably skip those couple introductory slides, because I think based on time, we don't need to. Do we need to do those?
Are either one of you able to share your screen on the slides? Because the way my computer's behaving, that makes me nervous. I apologize.
I think I can.
Getting this open, I'm afraid opening the PowerPoint would make it crash. I apologize.
Okay.
You gonna get it, Kevin, or you want me to get it?
Yeah. Well, I'm only on a laptop, so if you're on a big computer, Nicole, if you could do it, that'd be great.
Sure.
But if you have a problem, let me know. Need to tell Stuart, Jacqueline, you need a new computer, right?
Well, this is the irony. He approved my computer being massively upgraded and having them come on site. I have this contract to do that, and then COVID-19 happened. So, and I can't turn it over to them. I can't afford to live without it. So it has gotten delayed. It has not caused a problem until this very day. So aren't you guys lucky? My apologies.
Yeah.
So I will say we've had a lot of discussion on some of the topics they're going to touch on today. I know a lot of you want to talk about e-commerce, a lot of you, and how that might affect the store and its layout. A lot of you want to talk about delis and what changes are happening there if we're going to service. I know I shared all of that with Kevin and Nicole, and that stuff is going to be covered today. If, as they're talking, you have questions, comments, please do throw them in the chat. Other areas you're hoping they'll cover. Again, we won't answer them right away, but I'll be watching them and integrating them into the conversation with Kevin and Nicole.
Let's see, can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so let's get to this. We are Kevin and Nicole. Thank you very much. Real quick plug, Seven Roots is a worker co-op, and we design and support natural food stores and food co-ops from conception to completion.
Oh no. Nicole, you just froze.
You're kidding me.
I'm not, she's not frozen for me. Is she for others?
I can still see Nicole.
Yeah.
Yep. You're good, Nicole. Keep going.
You're good.
All right. So we have three basic strategies that we work on with stores. Design build, so anything from store planning, architecture, engineering, interior design. And what we have that other firms don't often have is that integrated approach with career co-op people, essentially, who all we've done is food co-ops, independent natural food stores, and the kinds of stores that you want to operate. We also have Heather, our manager, does a lot of work with telling your story and capital campaigns and branding and rebrands and all of that fun stuff. So we're able to tie that into the store design piece. And then we work on, we're all operators. We've all worked in stores. Half of us are currently in stores. We're board members. We're co-op shoppers. This is pretty much all we do. Kevin, you want to take it from here?
Sure. So, we clearly know that grocery is changing. And, if there's one thing that I've learned over the last 3 months is that, contrary to what co-ops used to be, is we've learned to change on a dime in the last 3 months. We've learned to say, oh, we don't have to have process here. We can experiment, and at least some of our customers have been good about experimenting with it and letting us fail a little bit, but we'll figure it out. And so as we talk about this, we really want to take a look at what your priorities are moving forward with design, what you think your facilities are going to look like, what kind of programs you think you're going to have, and then we can start to talk about the layout and the design of it. And those are pretty important components with, currently right now, I think a lot of people, everything that they're doing, it all goes through a safety filter now. Now, hopefully at some point that will go away, but in the interim, it's still going to have to be factored in. So, you want to go to the next one?
And I'll kind of jump in, piggybacking off of what Kevin said. So co-ops right now are kind of lucky. We are able to adapt and adjust and be nimble to what's going on in our culture, and we're changing habits. So the people that are already open in the stores that are already dealing with all of this, like curbside and e-commerce and social distancing, they're going to have that nailed down. And by the time your store opens, you need to have your programming nailed down. People aren't going to be as forgiving. They're not going to be changing with you. They're going to be used to what they have now and what they've had for the past 3 months moving forward. So Kevin's right, making sure that your programming and your operations are incredibly efficient. You know what you need to put in your store, and you know your customer base, and are able to work that into your performa.
Yeah, and with that, keep in mind that currently we are re-educating our entire membership base. So we're telling them not to come to the store, or come less frequently, have bigger baskets, and if you can't do that, do curbside. And the longer this continues, they're going to actually embrace some of this. So just keep that in mind, because we're re-educating everybody to do this. And some people may actually like ordering online and not going to the store.
And psychologically, our brains, with 2 months is the kind of the average of how you can make or break a habit. So by the time we have our customers doing the same thing for 2 months over again, that's what they're used to, and we've already gotten that shopping habit into their daily schedule. So if you want to do something different, then you have to retrain all of them, at the same time keeping in mind what your competition and what other stores are doing as well.
Yeah. So as we look at some of the components, one of the things that separates us from conventional stores is the social aspect of our store. And the obvious question becomes, okay, do I build a cafe in? Do I have a food bar? I mean, what aspects of this design in the operations? Do I do wider aisles? Do I make room? what's my front end going to look like? You know, are we still going to have some kind of a gatekeeping component in place? So, you know, these are all these things are going to be forever and cast in stone. You know, I'm not sure, but you have to start designing in components that you're able to fulfill the customers, your membership needs, but at the same time, keep everybody safe in this current environment. So let's take a kitchen by example. How many, you know, I'll ask the question, how many people have the kitchen that they desire or want, and it's big enough, and you know, and you can actually social distance it? Almost probably nobody. So when we think about kitchen design as in an operation, okay, you know, where's the wiggle room there? You know, design the kitchen that you think you're going to need, that you're going to use based on your pro forma and everything. But you may initially have to outsource some of the products to start with, because you can't have enough manpower for production. So there's a fine line we walk here, but you know, the point is, you're going to design the kitchen. You know, are you going to design it with more storage for potential, you know, curbside storage? You know, are you gonna put curbside storage refrigeration outside? You're going to build that into the plan if you think it's going to grow. So really important questions to start thinking about as we move this along.
And I would say, like, I see Larry on here, Larry Paulner from NCG Development Co-op. I'm sure he's doing the same thing I am. All of my clients were redesigning most of their stores, or at least taking a look at the operational piece, like in a kitchen. If you have 30 inches between your workspaces, you can't safely get by if your barista needs to be on one end and someone making a burrito needs to be on the other. So what do you do with your labor dollars? What do you do with your programming? What do you do with your menu? All of these things have to be rethought. And, you know, as I'm doing more research and taking more classes like FMI and the CDC, they think this is going to be 2 years of this at least. And by then we're going to have a lot of things that are different, because trends are going to change, not only with COVID, but just in the industry itself. So going through and really thinking what you need and how you want to operate it and is it possible is something you need to really sit down with your store planner and do, because they're the ones that are going to be able to tell you what's right for your community based on all of the information that they have.
Can I pop in real quick and say we aren't seeing slides advancing. We're only seeing the first slide.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Interesting. Here.
There is a curse going on right now. It's not your fault, clearly, on this session.
I'm going to stop it and share it again.
Okay.
I just do.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay.
We're past that. There you go.
Yep, there's all that. Just more pictures. Kevin's an amazing photographer. Most of these came from Kevin. Okay. All right, so another area that's been hugely impacted, of course, is our staff. You know, all of these new things that they're now dealing with, and there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of questioning management, and there's a lot of, you know, just uncertainty that people are dealing with. And Kevin deals with that on a daily basis as the operations manager at Hunger Mountain. So we wanted to show you guys a couple of things that are changing and that are probably going to be here for a while. You want to go over that, Kevin?
Sure. So, you know, one of the things, again, there's some, you know, I won't say they're complete huge positives, but one of the things that will come up in store design is the amount of office space now. If there's one thing that we learned during this, we don't need as much office space as we used to need. Because
We
half
always
our
need-
workforce is working from home. So, and that's a positive because, office space is typically non-revenue producing. So, if we were to take some of that non-revenue producing space, we can now say, hey, what can we use this for? Whether it be, a test kitchen, or, can we do some, space that we can rent out? So there's great opportunities here. You just
I don't know, did Kevin cut out?
Kevin, we don't have any sound for you.
didn't have to be in the store.
There we go.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and I would say with that extra office space now comes in, for those of you that have existing stores, you can't use reusable bags anymore. Your packaging is probably, like, at the point you had it 10 years ago, you were trying to get rid of all the packaging, and now it's like, oh, just back. Well, we never saved the space for that. We gave that back to the retail section. So now we need to figure out how much extra space do we need for cleaning supplies and all of the packaging and the deli and all of that stuff. And so it's going to be, really careful, fine-tuned comb planning of what your operations really are. One of my favorite topics is e-commerce. Co-ops are slightly behind, and I'll say about 5 or 10 years compared to a lot of our competitors, and that has been okay because of the fact that we have such amazing customer service, and our in-store experience really gives customers more of what they want, right? So, like, they're not necessarily wanting to have that if they're going to have curbside pickup or if they're going to have home delivery. But now that we can't offer that to them, we need to at least look at whether or not e-commerce is something that we need to adapt and kind of use moving forward. There's not a lot of stores that are able to do their own platform, so I'd say that definitely need to talk about using like Instacart or Postmates or whatever it's going to be, and you really need to figure out if it's right for your co-op. There are situations where if you have a really tiny co-op and food access is just your issue, you might not need to have e-commerce or pickup at all. But if you are in the middle of Los Angeles, you should probably have e-commerce. So working with your store planner and figuring out what kind of program can we put together that is sustainable and also efficient and really like able to make the co-op more successful. You have to be able to take a look at that and figure out how you're going to operate it and if it's really worth it, and all of the different programs that you can do and implement, which one's right for you. And Kevin, I know you've been going through that with Hunger Mountain. I've up in Briar Patch and Grass Valley and been working with them on it, and it's hard.
Yeah, and I would say for startups, one of the most important things is it might not be on your plate right away, but it's an important part to think about your point of sale system. Is there an integrated e-commerce part to that? Think about, will you plan in extra storage for it? It doesn't have to happen from the get-go, but you should be thinking about it and plan for the future in it, because if you go with a ECRS and Catapult, they have a built-in web cart, and you don't have to use it right away, but it's there. You can start to think about it, and as you feel comfortable, get started. It really depends on what your needs are. We had no desire to do curbside before 3 months ago.
So
Never, our
can I ask real quick?
Go ahead,
We're getting a lot of questions on this one, of course, and actually opinions if you guys have a chance to look in the chat.
I can't look in the chat, unfortunately.
No, I totally get it. Once the slides are up, it's a mess. So folks are saying, well, what's the minimum square footage? I think what we're going to hear is most startups, or a lot of startups who are on this call, are in pretty high, either they're in cities or they're in suburbs of major cities. And so there's this question, the question is more, what's the minimum square footage we actually need to set aside for e-commerce staging? Like, what could solutions to that look like? What are co-ops doing now? Like, So how do they think through space if they're actually like, you know, we probably are going to do e-commerce? Like, we're in a community where we think that's likely.
You know, and I wish there were a formula that I could share that would be perfect for everybody to use, but it honestly really is sitting down and going through with your store planner, your design team. How big is your store? What kind of demographics are you really targeting? Do you think people are going to want to shop? Do they want to shop before on, you know, get delivery, or do they want to shop for and come into the store, and kind of figuring out what they want and all of that? Then you're able to start doing some projections on how many orders per day. And then if you can take a look at how many orders per day you're going to do, then we can start building out the space that you need to do to provide for that. Because if your basket size is going to be $25 and you're getting 20 customers for curbside a day, that is going to be different than someone that's doing $75 and getting, you know, 100 customers a day. And that's something that we have to work through. We have to go through that. And it's been super challenging, but also really, really informative. And we're able to look at, you know, examples from some of our conventional stores and some of like our larger natural food stores, and see kind of what they've been doing to lay the path forward for it. So yeah, I wish there was a square footage number.
And I would also add though that, I mean, when you start to do your pro forma, you know, I think it's healthy to think about what the projections might be, you know, whether it's 2% of gross sales or 10% of gross sales. And once you start to do, you know, think about what that projection is, then you can back it down. You can look at what the dollar sales are. And then once you look at the dollar sales, you can start breaking it down into number of orders. And then you can really drill down into it. And then you can look at your storage needs. You can look at how you're going to pack it. You can do all those other things. But I think at some point you have to make a projection of what you think it's going to be as far as your overall sales are going to be.
With my clients, I'm able to work with like what standard in the industry, what standard across grocery, what standard in their area, take a look at like competitors, and really take a look at their pro forma and figure out like, okay, it might be 1% or 7%, whatever that is. We're taking a really, really good educated guess based off, you know, hundreds of data points.
And I saw in the chat box that somebody asked a question about profitability. You know, right now, I mean, it's a service that we're providing.
Yeah, it's not profitable.
You know, it's a service. It's and if you think you're going to go into this to make a lot of money at it, you know, I wouldn't go in with that notion, because you know, it's a convenience right now, and we're doing it as a safety measure. And as I said, we looked at this probably 5 years ago and said, you know, we don't really have an interest in it. But it's a service right now, and the goal here for us is to figure out how do we do this, incorporate it into our normal business model, and can we make a little bit of money at it? I mean, in our case at Hunger Mountain, we're not even charging for the service. We've come to the point where we said this is a service for high risk people, and that's why we're doing it. So we're not charging anything extra.
So can I ask on a store design level? So I think we'll move on from this topic. I didn't mean to get you guys caught up in the e-commerce one. We had a whole session with Michelle so about the e-commerce thing. But I do think you know, how that flexibility is worked in is something you said would work through with individual designers. David from NCG made a very good comment on here. You know, it's going to depend on volume, how much space you will need to do that.
Yep,
and then Nicole, designer, I mean, can you speak to for a moment, some of what we're hearing is that, you know, you say being flexible, also creating flexible multi-use spaces. Do you see that in the future to kind of accommodate the possibility of e-commerce?
Oh, absolutely. I feel like you're going to have to go through every section of your store, and in particular seating. We're not doing seating right now. All of our seating areas are empty. So it's a perfect spot for stocking all of your orders.
Yeah, staging and stocking, and yeah.
And then in the future, it can be something else. And I'll tell you, like grocery and retail will always take whatever space you give it. So if you give it too much space, you can give it back. It's just very hard to take it from them when they have already had it. And Honestly, it's more than just like the space that you need to have for just your deliveries and orders. Like, you have to figure out, are your pallets going to be going up front a lot? Are we going to have big rolling carts? How wide are our aisles? Can we make the turning radius with staff and like a pallet jack and a pallet, and then all of the stuff that's going through there? So it's really taking a look at how the whole store is going to operate as a whole rather than just one area. But
Thank you.
space is like, yes, you're going to need space, and we can always give it back to somebody else. Let's figure out where it needs to be and what's the most efficient way to use it.
I love they're sharing the complexity. That's what I want people to get. Like, so it's not that Nicole is avoiding answering the question, but
No.
that you'll be working with your designer to design the store, realizing that you may need to imagine several areas of your store doing several different things depending on what happens, and that can be done. Especially now that we've heard from Kevin, that you need a lot less office space, which is a big thumbs up. Okay, I'll let you two. There, of course, there's a lot of questions about bulk and deli. I'm gonna let you two move it on from e-commerce, and we'll get to those questions in a minute.
Awesome. Yeah, and
Great.
do you want to just keep asking us the questions, Jacqueline? Are we saving them towards the end, or seems
How
like
do you guys prefer to operate? Do you want me to keep sharing some of what we're hearing, or do you rather it all waited to the end?
I mean, why don't you, like, if somebody has a hankering, I mean, let's ask the question. I mean, it's all good if it's on this topic. So
It is definitely on. This one's on this topic. So folks are taking you into the land of bulk.
wow.
okay.
And they definitely want to hear from store designers and operators about that. People are worried about there being too many touch points for transmission, but not only like what's going to happen with it, we're having specific questions coming up a lot about deli and now bulk, about service and being full service and having things behind the counter in the good old fashioned way. And yeah, so I'd love to hear you speak to that.
Oh, man, like so I've been in grocery store planning for 15 years now, and I remember it was full service when I started, and it was like deli style, and then it went to like all self-service, and then we switched back over, and now we're all going to be self-service again. And that's going to be the foreseeable future. That doesn't mean that you can't have amazing deli program, right, Kevin? Like, you can still do awesome things at self-service, but yeah, it's not going to be able to be the way that it was 6 months ago. And you need to really take a look at what that means for safety, what it means for space. Actually, it's going to probably give you a lot more space to be able to dedicate to all of the other social distancing things that need to be done. But I think I'll save more. You do the deli and I'll do bulk.
Okay. So in the deli, you just have to rethink your programs. I mean, for those that already have established co-ops, I mean, what do you do with your $40,000 food bar that you're not using right now? How you have to be creative to say, listen, can I do some kind of, meal service? Can I prepare stuff in my cold wells? Can I just prepackage it? Can I do the same thing in my hot wells where it's prepared and it's ready to go? Is it just sandwiches and things? You have to bulk up your grab and go. We just instituted a curbside lunch program where you order your lunch, and then we set somebody outside with some coolers, and you just drive through, you pick up your lunch. I think now's the time, it's really important to be creative and use, you have this labor that's not producing, so what else can they do? And so it's really taking a hard look at your concept and what you want to focus on and really do that well. And it's a fine line because we're controlling the number of people coming in the store, right? We're asking people not to come in the store, but people are having a difficult time cooking. They're having a difficult time, doing a lot of the things that they're just used to. And so now they're trying to recreate new routines, and we should be able to help them with that. And
so as you're discussing the future of this, you said there's going to be more space in the kitchen. Do you foresee the hot bars and so forth coming back? Like, if you're designing a food co-op in the next 12 months to be opened, do you see putting in the hot bar? Do you see putting in the cold bar? Like, what are your thoughts, Kevin?
$50,000. Just save it. You can. So I like clients to have a master plan. so that you have an idea of what you want to start with and the growth pattern that goes on. I usually plan for about 30% of your sales increase, right? You have like this big idea of what you want to do at maturity. And then you can kind of work backwards and say, where am I going to do this? So we can put some of those things in place or plan for them, like drains for a food bar, but save the 50 grand. You're not going to need it. You're also going to need like 12 feet around the food bar, where right now 6 or 8 is fine. Get to double that. So you're just not going to have the space and be able to make up the sales.
Yeah.
Okay, so Kevin, you don't see those coming back anytime soon then programmatically?
No, I don't. But I do like the idea of saying, okay, you know, it will come back at some point. So build in that flexibility. Use it for a grocery flex area right now, and you know, and then 2 years down the road, put the food bar in, because to put the food bar in now and try and programmatically build, probably not the same type of programs. I don't know if it's going to be as successful. And if we're limiting the number of people coming in the store, it's really the purpose of a food bar is to drive a lot of people to it's a buffet. We want to drive people through there and get them in and out. And that's not what we're doing right now.
And even down the road, though, I think, there's a lot of debate, if things will be back to normal a year, 2 years, whatever. But it sounds like what I'm hearing is it'll kind of, maybe that stuff will come back, be prepared for that, but don't assume it. So what does the deli that opens, like the store opens a startup in the next year, what does that deli program look like? People were expecting cold bars, hot bars, maybe some service. What does it actually look like? What should it look like?
It's going to be heavily slanted to grab and go. You're going to have, you should probably plan and build in a fair amount of outsourcing, local distributors, ethnic foods, things like that. There'll be a lot of dinner solutions. You should be able to try and build in some kind of, call in ahead lunch orders type of thing. So somebody just comes in and picks it up. A special menu for that.
Drive-through. A lot of my independent stores, we are working on drive-throughs. And how do we make that work? And it's very, very profitable if we're able to do it right. And they've implemented them. Some stores have already opened them up even in Canada. Yeah.
So it's definitely more self-service. It's definitely more convenience. And you're just from a kitchen standpoint, the bonus there is you're not going to have that much staff. So your labor component should be less.
Okay. And we have to be honest too, like people are going to be used to this at every store they go to. So it's not like they're going to go to Whole Foods and get their food bar food and not be able to get it at your store. This, by a year from now, like my kids are young, they'll never even remember food bars, and they might come back in 5 years and they might not, but we don't know yet. So don't put it in right now if you're not able to be successful with it in the store. Plan for what you need now.
I'm going to take us back to, okay, so I'm going to let David speak for a second in a moment, but so it's always fun when we have other experts show up because they have a hard time not throwing in, but before we do that, there is kind of this question keeps coming back, like, what about any service, like our deli meats and cheeses and cutting, like some co-ops are reopening service, and are you seeing no service in all grab and go, or are you seeing limited service in deli?
Not for startups. It's going to be really hard to have to shift all of that programming or potentially shift all that programming when you're still learning how to be a successful grocery store. Okay. And so for me, it's like, yeah, that might be in your future, and let's maybe talk about how that would work and like figure out how we can plan and program for that. But know that it's just safe and smarter to maybe not do that in the beginning. And again, on region, like a small store that's, under 5 million, they probably wouldn't have done it even pre-COVID. So like, we don't have to worry about that now. It's the larger stores that have all of this extra, like background, and they're mature. They're able to figure out what they need to do to operate, and they're not new operators.
Yeah, and I would say, as far as programming, with like the meats and cheeses, so yeah, I think you're going to have to adapt that and make that part of a grab and go. You can socially distance and prepackage some of this stuff, and I think most people are used to that at this point. So and hot foods, yeah. I mean, for those people that have food bars that they're not using, you could put roasted chickens in there, put different
Okay.
types of hot meals to go, beans and rice, things like that. But I don't think prepared foods goes away, but I think you have to recognize that again, it's that if we're limiting number of people in the store, you're not going to do a whole lot of volume with that. So you just have to be mindful because, as we all know, everybody sitting in this room, experts and not, you have the greatest opportunity to lose the most money in prepared foods. And if you're not smart about it and you're not, thinking about it, and I would always tell everybody, go slow to start, simple's better, and you just test some things, test a few things, and hopefully your customers will figure out what they want, and you can produce that.
Well, that's what it's all about, is bringing what your customers want to them, right? So you really need to figure out what they want. Like, what's the goal of their food service experience? And it might be where you have this amazing program where you are like killing it on lunch delivery or something, or you're able to do something special that you can really like engage with the rest of the community and partner with people and offer your customers the things that they are not, now not able to get, that customer service and that experience, and be like something that you can only get at the co-op. And it's like, those are the really fun things to start working on, and you're at the perfect stages to do it because your store's not there.
So I'm going to wrap up the deli section for a little bit and speak to, so just so David never knows, Nicole, this, like, we're talking mostly to startups, people who are going to open at like 2 to 4 million. So I just want to make sure that's in people's minds. And second of all, there is a lot of ways to do hot, actually, that doesn't take a hot. And those of us, actually Francis is on the line, those of us who've done smaller stores have found all sorts of ways to bring hot into basically a grab and go experience. And there's all sorts of ways to do that. So we're not going to dive in unless there ends up being time at the end about that. But, and flexible ones, you're like, well, we have to plan for that. Honestly, there are little, couple $1,000 fixtures you can put on a countertop with a plug and decide all of a sudden you're having hot burritos. And I've had programs that made crazy money out of that one little case. So you're like, we have to know now. Actually, we got to go back to what Nicole and Kevin said about really flexible space that can allow us to adapt programs, but not things like $40,000 hot bars that could become an albatross around our neck because we don't know what's next. Okay, so I'm going to move us to bulk foods. We had all sorts of questions about what's going to happen with bulk foods, accessing bulk foods. Should that go to service? Handing it over to you.
I love bulk. I love that that's one of our differentiators, and I'm sad but excited that it's changing. For the most part, gravity bins are pretty much gone. There will probably be some stores that will have them right now and that are very successful and customers are comfortable using it. But what I see everybody doing is having prepackaged bulk items. And you can also have some prepackaged stuff in bins of some sort, or you can do scoop bins and grab stuff out. But most of the prep is happening in the back so that there isn't that cross-contamination COVID virus.
Because I'm seeing in my region, of course, just my region, I think it's very different. Scoop bins are gone. The gravity is staying, and people seem to think that that's going to stick around. You think even that probably won't?
What? I mean, I think it depends on the area that you're in. Like in California, it's super strict, right? And like, nope, all the gravity bins are pretty much empty in most of the stores. There are some smaller stores where the virus hasn't hit as hard, and so they're able to, keep those gravity bins. It's really something that, as you're going through your store plan, know that there's not one answer. And if for any of this, other than like, yes, you have to wear a mask, like there's not really just one answer. So you can go through and figure out what you can do, and bulk isn't going to go away. It's just going to look different.
Okay. Yeah, and I would say, keep in mind that even prior to this, bulk was in stores was running flat or really declining. So I think you just have to be mindful of this. And yeah, I mean, I see most stores that I go into now, it's a combination of gravity bins and prepackaged bulk. And people are still, they're still buying it. But I don't think this is going to help bulk in the long run. And I think when we come out of this, I don't think there's just going to be a huge resurgence of bulk. I think you just have to be mindful of that when you're designing it.
Yeah, and for me, it's a lot about equipment. So store planners lay out all of the equipment and have, really good understanding of what you're going to need in your store. There are ways that you can add bulk bins very inexpensively to your gondola shelving. So if you go into it thinking I'm going to do maybe just bulk coffee for a while and then the rest is going to be pre-pack, you can add stuff later. You don't know what's going to come back. It's about $5,000 to $6,000 per 4-foot section. So let's save that money and then we can add it in later if that's something that your community and your membership wants, and if it's profitable.
Quick comment from Francis was that Trade Fixtures is actually already coming out with anti micro gravity bin handles. So it sounds like a lot of things, and that's something Don brought up in an earlier session on Don Moffitt that I want to reference. I know he's here today. Is that co-ops have been pretty darn ingenious in creating solutions. Especially, I think the people are feeling very disheartened about the ecological effect of some of these changes. And so just keep in mind that things are going to evolve fast, and your store designer is going to be on top of those things and be able to share those with you and how you get around some of those things. So, okay, I'll let you guys go ahead and finish on bulk. Then we have some big picture questions.
Yeah, and I'll go back to the point about if the pandemic did one thing for us, it really taught us how to experiment and change things very quickly, which was not part of our DNA prior to this. So I think we're learning how to do this, and I think that's really important because as we move forward, you're going to find out what works for your membership, and that's really the critical component here. I know, our gravity bins. We work hard at maintaining them and keeping them safe, but we've replaced a lot of our scoop items to pre-pack.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a question about that. People said, isn't moving it to pre-pack really hurting labor? I'm so glad to hear startups thinking about that. Thoughts about that and how stores are going to absorb that?
So, go for it, Kevin.
Yeah. So, pre-pack, depending on, what your label model is and your benefits and everything, you're going to trade off labor dollars for margin when you go to pre-pack. It's really that, if you buy it, your margin is going to be less, but if you pre-pack it, your labor is going to be higher. So and then you have to again think about the social distancing space and how much room you're going to have to pre-pack and things like that. So it's always a good question, and you have to, when you start to look at your pro forma, you have to look at where you think bulk is going to come in to the sales component. Let's face it, grocery in most stores is predominant in sales. So, wherever you can make grocery bigger and better, you might want to do it.
Yeah, and a lot of my clients are outsourcing. Like smaller stores especially, they don't need 18 feet of bulk bins and 50 kinds of lentils. They really just need that core staple group. So they're outsourcing a lot of that, and customers are fine with it. And there's a lot of new producers and a lot of new people in the scene now, just as a result of this. People are just inundated with all of these different bulk products now. So you can do a lot of that and then grow into a program later as things steady out a little bit.
And just real quick, for those of you who don't know, because you're startups, when Nicole says outsource, there are a lot of bulk companies that will pre-pack for you. So you're just purchasing it pre-packed, in case anyone didn't know what that meant.
Thank you.
No, that's cool. So I'm going to move to some other questions because there's so many coming in. People are concerned about the added expense of the physical store with just needing to have larger aisles, accommodating more, it just feels like we're going to need more square footage to sell less. And is that really going to be the case, or do you think that's going to be, are people going to be able to sell as much out of the same square footage?
It depends on the store, of course, naturally, like the one answer no one wants to hear. But broadly, yes, you need to have more space now. Doesn't mean you have to sell less. You know, there are ways to get over that. You can go vertical. Your equipment is going to play a huge role in what you do, the flexibility of it, making sure that it's appropriate. It's not, you know, equipment for a conventional store and super, super deep that you can't use it. So there's a lot of different ways that you can work on that. And then also on your margin too, and like really have a tight operation so that you're able to make up any of those dollars. But those are things that you work with your design team and your store planner. We go through it like fine-tooth comb through the pro forma and make sure that every little labor dollar we've got is accommodated for. And then we start working on the merchandising and figuring out what people really want. So yeah, more space, but I'm not too worried about it, to be honest.
But operationally too, I mean, when we talk about more space, it doesn't necessarily mean that you almost have to enlarge the footprint. You might just want to say, hey, we're going to take away the wings. We're not going to have K-stacks. We're going to be very mindful of our merchandising. So there's ways that you can do it in the store, because we always want to merchandise everything the best we can, but sometimes you can just say, hey, we're going to shrink some of these. The aisles are going to be the same. We're just not going to put K-stacks and wings on the end caps and things like that. So we can just leave some space for people to move.
Yeah.
So, and that's, again, like, I'm really glad we're going to dig into what flexibility means. So I think every answer you guys have had is about flexibility of using the space, and how what's going to be massively different is we're not going to set our stores and then leave them that way for 5 to 7 years. It's just not likely to happen. And that's what your store designer is going to help you look at, is how do we design the store in a way that we can change these things, move these things without incredible costs later, because we don't know what's coming. But what you're also, I think I'm hearing from you too, is confidence that we've already adapted really fast, and that we will continue to adapt. And as long as we build stores that are adaptable, we can keep those sales moving. Am I hearing you guys right?
Absolutely.
I don't have a single client that their sales are not back to where they were, if not improved. Like, people took a little bit of a hit, but that's going to go away.
That's not the case. But yes, a lot of stores are actually seeing growth, or sales are back to normal. And we're learning a lot of lessons from those stores and knowing what's causing that. And a lot of startups are actually stores that have started in the last 5 to 7 years are in that category of fast growth, or, you know, above average growth. And we can go into why some other time, but keep in mind that startups seem to have a little bit of advantage in these circumstances. So some of these questions are beyond store design. So I'm being picky, guys. I don't mean to be mean. I'm like, okay, so now you're really asking Kevin to pull out the crystal ball. And maybe if I could get, you know, if I unmuted Francis and David and Don, and we decided to have a big free-for-all about what they think, we might have some answers. but that's kind of not what we were planning to do today. Folks are asking, and this is a little bigger than store design, but for what it's worth, I'd love to throw to you too. You know, you keep referencing the market study, but the thing is that the market study, we just, you know, had some sessions with Debbie Swasuna, and what we're hearing is market studies will basically be done the way they used to be done for the foreseeable future. We don't have new data, and yet we know the way people are buying bulk is different. The way people are buying all these things are different. So how is that? Like, what can we do beyond the market study to make sure that the pro forma is reflecting what what departments should be focused on and what should be done by the time we get to the store designer?
So, good question. And one that, you know, I've talked to Debbie a couple times about. And honestly, for me, what I'm doing with clients now is I'm looking at the market study and using it mainly for your sales projections. And yes, we don't have the data yet. You know, larger stores are going to have more data than we are. It's not going to trickle down, and we're not going to be as accurate, but we're usually pretty conservative. And so I really just want that. I want to know that it's a viable business, you know, because I can take the numbers from the pro forma and we can make that work, and we can, you know, nail down all of the different programmatic pieces. But I feel like as long as you've had a market study that has been recently updated, it's still going to be something that we're able to use. So I don't think in 6 months you need to go change it, because we're going to be in a constant state of change for, you know, the foreseeable future. So there's not going to be anybody that has all of that data or all of that information. Let's just use what we've got.
And I'll add on that. And what I like to do is I like to break down the pro forma a little bit more and break it down into the sub-departments, and have everybody really understand what the numbers mean, in the sense that, okay, this is what you're expecting. every day on average from your dry grocery department. This is what you're expecting every day from perishables. This is what you're expecting every day from frozen. And literally, you know, put it into numbers that say on a daily basis, this is what you have to produce collectively to make this number. And
we can say how many sandwiches you need to sell in order to meet this.
exactly. And when you start to break it down that way, it starts to make a little bit more sense, because hopefully you can say, yeah, that's not that, we can't do that. That's not practical. So we're going to have to, you know, change something here to make those numbers. And, or you're going to have to shift some of the resources from one department to another. So I take those pro formas and I break them down into very minute pieces and make sure that it makes sense, that they're capable of actually producing what they say they're going to produce on a daily basis.
So what the question there then is, I think for startups, that's great, Kevin. I think the question there is then, so you get this pro forma and it assumes these things about these departments, and then you get to the store designer. Does the store designer do that? Like really break down the sub departments and what we need to program at? Okay, so that's what they need.
Your store designer better know exactly what product selection you've got, what equipment it needs to be on, and it better be able to go through the pro forma with you and talk about staffing models and talking about how you're going to hire a general manager, what someone needs to know. This person needs to understand the operations of a store very, very completely. And then we work, you know, like Kevin and I will work together on a lot of things because he's so intricate into the deli and can get into those itty bitty numbers, you know, on a larger scale than I can. So like the people that you're working with, they're going to have so much of this information. Okay. And they're doing it every day.
I just want to make sure stars heard that when you take that pro forma and you go to the store designer, you've got these major departments in that pro forma. It's your store designer who's going to help you break that down into what that means, sub-department wise, program wise, all that stuff. So it's not like you have to come to them with all that. You have these department areas, and then you're going to work together to break those things down into what that means programmatically. So I want to make sure we got that. Jess asked a great question, but Jess, I don't know that this is maybe there's maybe a answer to this, but I just want to point it out because it's lovely. I love when I see startups thinking so smart. So, you know, trying to figure out beyond the market study what our market wants. You know, Nicole, you referenced you're going to figure out what your market wants. You know, what we often hear is, well, survey your owners. And I love that Jess said our owners don't actually necessarily represent consumers in our trade area.
No, you don't want, that's not just your membership.
So how do you think that through? Like how do you decide what those consumers in that region want when you're working through this with a store designer?
So we personally keep like a database of all of the clients that we work with and have all of those different data points that we can pull out. Most people have something like that if they're in the grocery industry, but also just common sense of using your market study. Another thing that's not going to change is going to be like those demographics. At this point, like the demographics are safe to use. So if we can figure out the radius of people that we need to target, we can go to them and get some of those surveys answered. Because really, you're going to have your membership, but those might not be the people that, of course, are shopping at your store. So it's really going to be like figuring out who those people are, your target market, who you want to ask, getting a good representation with everybody, lots of incentives, and really like staying on people and making sure that they're able to give you the answers that you need with the right questions.
Okay. I'm going to take it back to some things once about aisles. And this one will go to you, Kevin, since you're living it. Is that really working out in stores? Are people actually staying with directional aisle usage? And do you see that sticking around?
So the directional aisle use, I don't see working. I mean, people are contrarians and they're just not going to do that. If they've missed an aisle and gone the wrong way, they're going to go down that aisle, unless you have somebody enforcing it, and nobody has, you know, extra resources to enforce it. So, so the critical piece is, how do you make it safe and wide enough and clean enough? So, you know, one of the options that I've seen quite a bit is, you know, how do you restock something in the middle of a day? And there's the picture that's on the screen right now is you close off the aisle for 10 or 15 minutes, and you have a SWAT team go in there and you just stock it. So, you know, I don't, like I said, I have not seen any stores that I've been into that have the directional signs actually work.
Okay. That expected, but it was good to hear from someone who's actually living it. One quick thing I do want to point out to Jess's question, just keep this in the back of your mind, startups. it is pretty average that 50% of the people who were owners before the co-op opened actually become regular shoppers. Just keep that math in mind. So Jess is very right that the people who end up show up and shopping may have very different ideas about what needs to be on the shelves. I mean, clearly you want to serve your owners, you will listen to your owners, but that can't be your only source of information. So, all right. I think I've gotten through most of the questions on design. Do you guys have, we have another 5 minutes or so. Are there other slides or things you guys wanted to get to?
Well, we were going to talk a little bit about messaging. We did most of that.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that, when you talk about messaging, it's unless you actually put out what you want your consumers to do, it's hard for them to know what to expect when they get there. So it's really important to have, a really good program for messaging, whether it's in the pandemic right now, whether it's sales, whether it's capital campaigns, all those kind of things are really important. And the messaging really has to be well thought out. And it's basically trying to convey what you are to your membership and what you're doing. And I always say to people, you can't do too much of that.
Well, it's for current stores, retraining staff. Like your marketing manager right now, or a marketing manager is used to having flash sales, and they're used to putting up Memorial Day stuff maybe 2 days before the holiday weekend, and all this stuff. Groceries completely changed, and now that you're going to have people come in, less, and you're asking them to shop every 2 weeks rather than 3 times a week, you have to message differently. And so you have to be able to have everybody understand who your co-op is, what it's going to do, how they're going to shop it, and how they're going to still feel safe, and make sure that you have someone on your team that can really convey that to people.
And you guys see that sticking around. I have to say, in Central Illinois, I see people going back to shopping more often already. You see that sticking around, this like trying to get people to do bigger baskets and shop less often, and you see consumers, you think they will conform to that.
So
no, I don't. We're already seeing a higher customer count. Mm-hmm. For us, the customer count's going up, the basket size is going down, and it seems like our curbside is leveled off. So which tells me and things that people are going to start using it because they've quarantined themselves, they've stuck inside for 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's going to be an ebb and flow. Like all of the webinars and all the classes that I've been taking from like FMI and entrepreneur and all that stuff, it's just going to be really going to be an up and down. So you have to be able to plan for both, essentially. It's something that you have to keep forefront, and you have to just have, like that Kevin was talking, that filter of safety for staff and customers, or whatever that filter is. You need to be able to filter all of your messaging through something similar. And you're going to hit a second spike, and it's going to depend on where you're at. Like if you're in New York, like, you know what, you're probably not going to see the high customer count for very long. But if you're in a community that hasn't really been hit by the pandemic, then it's going to be easier for them. And, cases are going up again, and then they're going to go down. And so just keep it in mind.
And once again, having a store that's flexible can serve people both ways.
And the important thing is, whatever systems you put in place, when we were in lockdown, and if you fine-tuned them, if we go into lockdown again, it's already there. The blueprint's there. You can just really work on it. So.
And luckily, startups, you're gonna be able to learn from established co-ops and that. So I'm actually looking at the time. We're now at 10 minutes after the hour. We started 10 minutes after the hour, so we're at the full hour. So I am gonna take this moment to thank Nicole and Kevin so much for coming and sharing this. If anyone wants to stay on and they are able to and wants to ask some more questions, you can do that. But we have actually had a full hour session here now. So I'm going to thank them so much for giving such a dynamic presentation as the wrap up of our COVIDeo series. So thank you to Kevin and Nicole.
Yay, thanks everybody.
And I'm happy to stay, Jacqueline.
Okay.
My day's done, so I can do this. I know
Okay.
I'm flexible, so.
And I just shipped my daughter out, so I'm good for a little bit.
So if people want to stay and ask additional questions, please feel free to do that. I know a lot of you already stayed 10 minutes extra as it was. I am going to stop the recording at